Hi everyone, in this video we'll be looking into different types of population growth curves and their features. Now when we're talking about population growth curves, there's usually just two types. We have the exponential growth curve, also known as the J curve, and that kind of occurs when we have unlimited resources. And then on the other hand, we have the logistic curve, also known as the more realistic S curve, and that is when we have population just kind of fluctuating near the carrying capacity, leveling off there because we have limited resources like food, for instance. And today we're going to be looking specifically into the logistic curve, also known as the S curve of the population, and we're going to be looking into different types of features on the logistics curve. So firstly, we're going to draw our curve. We're going to have time on the x-axis, and we're going to have population size on the y-axis. The way that the curve is going to look is pretty much in its name. It's going to look a little bit like this, where we have this sort of general S outline in the curve. We're going to label different phases of the curve. Firstly, we're going to have the lag phase. We're going to get into detail a little bit later. And then the log phase. And then we're going to have a quick short transitional phase here. And then we're going to have a stationary phase, also known as the plateau phase. This is where the population just kind of reaches the carrying capacity and then fluctuates near there, depending on density independent and density dependent factors, but again, that's a topic for another lesson. Firstly, we're going to look into the lag phase and its features. Now, the lag phase is where the population is growing, but it's growing very slowly. And the population is generally adapting itself to the environment. And the individuals of the population are generally obtaining resources from the environment, and at the same time, they're kind of maturing into adults, getting ready for reproduction. Right. Secondly, we'll be looking into the log phase, also known as the exponential phase, and this is where the population of adults are relatively larger compared to the lag phase. So in the log phase, we're going to have a lot of adult populations, and so reproduction is indeed going to be faster, and that is why we have a huge growth in terms of population, but at the same time, the resources are going to be very plentiful and abundant, so there's very minimal competition due to resources. Thirdly, we're going to look into the brief transitional phase. It's a very short phase, transitioning from the log phase into the stationary phase. Now, in the transitional phase, what happens is the population is quite large. However, the competition for the resources is also quite intense. It's quite high. And therefore, the growth rate of the population is a little bit slower than it used to be in the log phase. Lastly, we're going to look into the stationary phase. Now, in the stationary phase, the population size is quite steady. And it has kind of reached its carrying capacity, which is basically kind of like the maximum number in terms of population that the environment or the space can carry. And so, because the carrying capacity is minimum, the population of the size is going to kind of stay where it is. It's not going to increase any further. If it were to change, it's only going to fluctuate. And to kind of provide a more clear definition of carrying capacity, it is the max population size that a particular species that can be tolerated by the environment, more specifically by the ecosystem, I guess. And that is where we are in terms of the logistic curve. we will be looking into what carrying capacity specifically means and how density independent and dependent factors kind of allow the population to fluctuate but still remain like within the level of the carrying capacity, and how this is a clear example of negative feedback. We'll be doing all of that in the next lesson, and this is pretty much it for this video. Thank you.